Any questions before we move past assertions? So let's take a look at a problem before we go on. If you look at in chapter 3, engagement planning, problem number 48, 348. Take a few minutes to read through that, and let's walk through the assertions. Oh, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong chapter. I meant to say problem 49 in chapter 1. I apologize for that. Chapter 1, problem 149. It's on page 33. Sorry about that. 149, chapter 1. Yes, it's on page 33. Okay, has everyone had a chance to go through at least half of them? Okay, so let's start with the PCAOB assertion, existence and occurrence, right? So what is the corresponding ASB assertion? And what's the nature of this assertion or category?
The nature should be a transaction.
So which one now? So existence. So let's start with existence. What's the nature, the category, and what's the corresponding ASB assertion?
The nature is a transaction.
Existence?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the corresponding, what would you say is the corresponding ASB assertion then? Vivian? No, okay. Existence, right? So here's what you have to do, right? And this is why. So the ASB, remember I said the ASB lumps them all together. They don't distinguish between category, but I want you to be able to distinguish between category of assertions. So existence, right? You have to first ask, well, what's the nature? Like what am I gathering an assertion about? And in this case, it's the existence. When you talk about existence, you're wanting to, the auditor's objective is, does this account exist, right? Is it a valid account, right? Because a transaction doesn't exist. A transaction occurs, right? A transaction doesn't exist. The existence of that transaction, the existence is the outcome of that transaction, right? That transaction occurred, and the outcome of that transaction is that I now have an account balance, right? I have something that affects my balance sheet, right? Because everything that flows through your income statement impacts your balance sheet, right? If I record a sale, if I sell to a customer, what's my transaction, what's my journal entry?
Receivables or cash.
Right. So I'm going to debit accounts receivable or cash, depending on whether it's a credit sale or a cash sale. And I'm going to credit revenue, right? Income statement, balance sheet. So it's going to hit my balance sheet. That transaction that occurred affects the balance sheet. So existence deals with account balances. Does this account asset exist? Does cash exist? Does inventory exist? Those are all balance sheet accounts. The occurrence then deals with the transaction. It flows through the income statement. A transaction occurred. I reflected that transaction in my income statement. So as Vivian pointed out, existence pertains to the nature of that assertion is account balances. The corresponding ASB assertion is existence, right? For occurrence, the corresponding assertion, ASB assertion, is occurrence. And the nature of the assertion is transactions and events. Okay, everyone clear on that? Also, if you look at presentation and disclosure, there's also occurrence, right? If you look at the corresponding assertion for that, right? Okay, what about the second one? What do you think? Rights and obligations. What's the corresponding ASB assertion, and what is the nature of the assertion? What do we mean by rights and obligations? What is that? When management's making assertions about rights and obligations, what are they asserting? Not a trick question. Vivian?
They own assets and claim
Right.
and take with liability.
Right. So then what would be the nature of that assertion? So but what did she say? They own the assets, right? They are obligated to pay their liabilities. Where does that appear? Right. And that would be assertions about account balances, right? And the corresponding ASB assertion, right, is rights and obligations. Right, and related to that account balance, you would also have disclosures, footnote disclosures, right? Because your footnote disclosures related to accounts receivable, so you could also see you also see the assertion about rights and obligations appearing in the assertions about presentation and disclosure. Right, so when you think about what you need to ask yourself, when I see existence, when management's making an assertion about existence, what are they saying? What are they trying to say? What are they telling me? When they make assertions about occurrence, what are they asserting? What are they saying is happening? Right? And that helps you to think through, well, what's the nature of it? Right? What is this assertion? What type of assertion is this? What category, I should say. All right, what about the next one? Completeness. What's the corresponding ASB assertion for completeness?
The nature is transactions.
Completeness is transactions, yeah. Okay, what about, what's the nature? Okay, what's the nature of the assertion or category of the assertions? Right. So that's describing what the assertion is. But what's the category? I should say when they use the term nature, I use the term category. What's the category of the three? What's the category?
Transactions, account balances, and
Right. So completeness pertains. The assertions about completeness pertains to all categories of assertions. Right. So in the assertions about transactions, it's just basically saying that all transactions that have occurred are recorded. All transactions that have occurred are recorded. When you reflect on when you talk about completeness related to account balances, all cash that should be reflected in the financial statements have been reflected. All inventory that should be reflected in the financial statements have been reflected in the financial statements, are recorded. What about valuation and allocation? What's the corresponding ASB assertion? And what's the category of assertion? Yes, Candace. Okay. And so you're absolutely right. Accuracy and valuation and allocation are the corresponding ASB assertions. What are the category of assertions? Right. Transactions and events, and that's the accuracy, right? That's the accuracy. So the assertion, the corresponding ASB assertion for valuation and allocation is accuracy with respect to transactions and events. And then the valuation and allocation would be what? Disclosures as well as account balances, right? Right, does that make sense? Everyone see that? So for valuation and allocation, the corresponding ASB assertions would be accuracy, as it pertains to transaction and events, and also presentation and disclosure, and then valuation and allocation as it pertains to account balances, as well as presentation and disclosure. Any questions on that one? Make sense? Okay, what about finally the last one, presentation and disclosure? What are the corresponding ASB assertions? Vivian.
classification,
Mm-hmm.
understandability,
Mm-hmm.
and then the category will
All right, so here's the deal. You want to make sure you understand. If you look at the exhibit in Chapter 1, Exhibit 1.4, Management Assertions, you will see how PCAOB assertions relate to ASB assertions, the relationship between those. And you want to make sure. So again, I want to stress, it is important to not just know the assertion. You have to know what category that assertion applies to. Because remember, this is the framework that auditors are using to develop their audit procedures, right? They're testing management assertions.